Rejection is one of the most painful experiences we can face as human beings. That feeling of being ignored, devalued, or discarded can deeply wound our self-esteem and shake our confidence. However, what distinguishes the great leaders, thinkers, and innovators of history is not the absence of rejection in their lives, but how they transformed that rejection into fuel for their obsession with success. The Stoic philosophy, developed in ancient Greece and refined by Romans like Marcus Aurelius Seneca and Epictetus, offers a powerful approach to transforming the pain of rejection into a driving force for personal growth. This method not only allows us to survive rejection, but to use it as a catalyst for profound transformation. Our neurological response to rejection is surprisingly similar to physical pain. Studies show that the same brain areas activated during experiences of physical pain also respond intensely when we suffer social rejection. This explains why being ignored or dismissed can be so distressing. Our brain literally processes these experiences as threats to our survival. The Stoic method begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. The Stoics identified that suffering comes not from the event itself, the rejection, but from our judgments about it. As Epictetus wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them." This distinction paves the way for our emotional freedom. The first step of this method is to practice objective apprehension, observing the rejection as a neutral fact without adding destructive interpretations. When someone doesn't respond to your message or doesn't value your contribution, observe only the concrete fact without concluding that this signifies your personal inadequacy or lack of worth. The second element is the principle of the dichotomy of control, perhaps the most powerful Stoic concept. The Stoics teach us to clearly distinguish between what is under our control and what is not. The reactions, opinions, and decisions of others are fundamentally outside our control. What we can control is our response, our interpretation, and how we choose to act from this moment forward. When we apply the dichotomy of control to rejection, we stop wasting mental energy obsessively analyzing the reasons for the rejection or trying to change the mind of the person who rejected us. Instead, we completely redirect our attention to what is within our power, our own actions, thoughts, and personal development. The third component involves cultivating emotional independence from external approval. The Stoics recognized our social nature, but also warned against excessive dependence on the opinions of others. Marcus Aurelius emphasized the importance of finding inner worth and peace regardless of external validation. This emotional independence doesn't mean isolation or coldness, but rather an inner freedom that allows us to act according to our values, even when facing disapproval or indifference. The fourth element is constructive reinterpretation, the ability to reinterpret rejection not as a definitive failure, but as a necessary redirection. The Stoics cultivated a providential view of life, believing that obstacles often guide us toward paths more aligned with our true purpose. That relationship that ended might be freeing up space for more meaningful connections. That missed job opportunity might be protecting you from a toxic environment or one unsuitable for your talents. The fifth and most transformative aspect of this method is channeling the emotional energy of rejection into a positive obsession with self-improvement. Extraordinary people throughout history have used rejection as fuel for their determination. They didn't just survive rejection, they transformed it into a driving force for excellence. It's important to distinguish this positive obsession from a bitter or resentful fixation. It's not about proving them wrong out of wounded pride, but about using emotional energy to fuel an unshakable commitment to your own evolution. This positive obsession manifests in concrete commitments to growth, setting ambitious yet realistic goals, and a disciplined focus on developing excellence in the areas you value. Stoic practice also includes specific exercises to strengthen our resilience to rejection. One is the premeditation of evils, praemeditatio malorum, where we anticipate possible rejections and mentally rehearse our virtuous responses. Another is the view from above exercise, where we contemplate our situation from a broader cosmic perspective, thereby diminishing the apparent intensity of our personal difficulties. When we incorporate these Stoic principles into our lives, we gradually transform our relationship with rejection. Instead of fearing it, we begin to recognize it as an opportunity in disguise for growth and transformation. Rejection ceases to be something we simply suffer and becomes a catalyst we can actively use to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. This proven method allows us to maintain dignity in the face of rejection, practicing strategic silence when necessary and managing our emotions with maturity. Paradoxically, the less desperately we seek approval, the more naturally it tends to come to us. People who demonstrate genuine self-confidence and emotional independence often attract more respect and admiration. The Stoic method does not promise to eliminate the pain of rejection. The Stoics were realists. They recognized that experiences like rejection inevitably cause emotional discomfort. The promise of Stoicism is not a life without pain, but a life where pain is transformed into strength, resilience, and wisdom. Through these 5 fundamental elements, objective apprehension, focus on what we control, emotional independence, constructive reinterpretation, and positive obsession with self-improvement, we can transform the universal experience of rejection into a driving force toward our best selves. As Marcus Aurelius demonstrated, even in the highest positions, rejection and adversity are inevitable. What defines our journey is not how many rejections we face, but how we choose to respond to them. Imagine yourself now in a recent situation of rejection. Perhaps a promotion that didn't come through, a project that was criticized, or a relationship that ended. The pain is real, there's no denying it. But instead of letting that pain paralyze you, you have the opportunity to transform it into a powerful engine for your personal and professional growth. Let's explore how to apply each element of the Stoic method in concrete everyday situations. Let's start with objective apprehension. When you face rejection at work, say your idea was dismissed in an important meeting, the first impulse might be to personalize this experience. My idea was rejected because I'm not competent enough, or they never take me seriously. Notice how quickly we move from the objective fact, the non-acceptance of a specific idea, to devastating interpretations about our personal worth. Practicing objective apprehension requires disciplined mental training. You need to pause when you feel the sting of rejection and consciously separate what actually happened from the stories you're creating about it. My suggestion was not adopted on this occasion is a fact. This proves I'm incompetent is an interpretation, and a particularly destructive one. This distinction isn't just a semantic game, it fundamentally alters your neurological response. When you maintain objectivity, your nervous system remains relatively calm. When you add catastrophic interpretations, you activate stress and anxiety circuits that can consume all your mental and emotional energy. In my own experience, I've realized how crucial this first step is. Over the years, I've worked with various clients in leadership positions who struggled to handle criticism or rejection. One of them, a CEO of a tech company, had a habit of turning any negative feedback into a judgment about his competence as a leader. By practicing objective apprehension, this specific client wasn't satisfied with this specific aspect of the product. Instead of "I'm a failure as a CEO," he managed to maintain the mental clarity needed to solve real problems instead of getting stuck in spirals of self-punishment. The second principle, the dichotomy of control, radically transforms your relationship with rejection. Think about a situation of romantic rejection. When someone ends a relationship with you, it's natural to want to control the situation. Make the person change their mind, understand exactly why they made that decision, or even try to punish them for rejecting you. The Stoics would say, stop trying to control the uncontrollable. That person's decision is outside your control. Their feelings are outside your control. What is under your control? Your response to this situation, how you choose to interpret this ending, what you will do from now on to grow and evolve. This redirection of attention isn't passivity or resignation. On the contrary, it's a strategic concentration of your energy where it can actually produce results. When you stop wasting emotional resources trying to change what cannot be changed, you unlock enormous potential for personal transformation. In the professional arena, this means that after having a project rejected, you don't waste time obsessively trying to convince others they were wrong. Instead, you ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I hone my skills? What project can I start now that applies my talents more effectively? The third element, emotional independence, is perhaps the most challenging in our era of constant validation on social media. We live in a time where personal worth seems directly tied to external recognition, how many likes, followers, or compliments we receive. This dependence on others' approval makes us extraordinarily vulnerable to rejection. The Stoics offer us a different path. They invite us to find value in our own integrity, in our adherence to the principles we consider virtuous, regardless of whether we receive applause for it. This doesn't mean completely ignoring external feedback, that would be unwise, but rather not letting others' opinions determine your sense of self-worth. In practice, this means that when you post content on social media or express an opinion in a meeting, your emotional well-being isn't completely at the mercy of others' reactions. You can receive the feedback, learn from it when appropriate, but your self-esteem remains anchored in your own internal standards. A powerful example of this comes from the world of entrepreneurs. The most resilient founders I've known cultivate a strong internal compass. When investors reject their pitch or customers criticize their product, they don't emotionally collapse. They can distinguish between useful feedback they should incorporate and noise they should ignore, keeping their essential vision intact. The fourth principle, constructive reinterpretation, is where the alchemy of transformation truly begins. Here you don't just accept rejection with equanimity, you reinterpret it as providential guidance, a sign pointing toward where you truly ought to be. Steve Jobs, in his famous Stanford commencement speech, spoke exactly about this principle when he described how being fired from Apple, a massive rejection for the company's founder, turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to him. During his time away from Apple, he founded two successful companies, Next and Pixar, and met his wife. When he eventually returned to Apple, he brought with him the experience and perspective that helped transform it into the most valuable company in the world. This isn't convenient hindsight, it's an active practice of reinterpretation. Faced with rejection, you can consciously choose to see the experience as a necessary redirection. Maybe that job you didn't get is protecting you from a toxic environment. Maybe that relationship that ended is opening up space for a connection truly aligned with who you are. In my own career, I've experienced rejections that initially seemed devastating, but which I later recognized as critical turning points that put me on a path much more aligned with my talents and passions. By practicing constructive reinterpretation, you don't have to wait years to perceive the hidden value in rejection. You can start extracting meaning and direction from it immediately. Finally, we arrive at the fifth and most powerful element: transforming rejection into a positive obsession with self-improvement. This is the step that truly distinguishes great achievers. They don't just endure rejection or find meaning in it, they use it as fuel for unshakable determination. Michael Jordan, after being cut from his high school basketball team, didn't just accept the cut philosophically. He transformed that rejection into an obsession with improving. He arrived earlier and left later from practice, dedicated himself to physical conditioning with unusual intensity, and worked tirelessly to perfect his game. The result of this positive obsession was becoming arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. J.K. Rowling had her Harry Potter manuscript rejected by 12 publishers before it was finally accepted. Instead of giving up, she continued refining her work and persisting. This obsession with perfecting her craft, despite constant rejection, led her to create one of the most successful literary series in history. The crucial difference here is the quality of the obsession. A negative obsession with rejection gets stuck in the past, ruminating on the pain and feeding a paralyzing resentment. A positive obsession uses the emotional energy of rejection to drive intense dedication to future growth. This is the most transformative element of the Stoic method because it completely redirects your attention from the past event that cannot be changed to the future you have the power to shape. Rejection ceases to be the end of a story and becomes the beginning of an extraordinary journey of self-improvement. How can you cultivate this kind of positive obsession? Start by identifying exactly what you want to improve, which skills, qualities, or capabilities you want to develop. Set specific, challenging, yet achievable goals. Create a detailed development plan with concrete steps. Then dedicate yourself with disciplined intensity to executing that plan, using the memory of rejection not as a weight, but as a propellant. In my experience working with high-performance athletes, I've noticed that those who transform defeats into fuel for training, without letting a bruised ego dominate their motivation, are the ones who consistently achieve extraordinary results. They don't train to show those who rejected them, but rather to fully manifest their own potential. However, it's important to recognize that this transformation rarely happens instantly. The Stoic process involves deliberate and consistent mental training. Just as we don't expect to develop physical strength after a single workout session, we shouldn't expect to master this emotional alchemy immediately. To facilitate this gradual transformation, the Stoics developed specific practices that we can incorporate into our daily routine. Let's explore some of them and how to apply them specifically to rejection. The premeditation of evils, premeditatio malorum, which we mentioned earlier, is particularly powerful. Before situations where rejection is possible, a job interview, a romantic advance, an important presentation, dedicate a few minutes to consciously visualizing a scenario where you face rejection. Don't do this with catastrophic anxiety, but with realistic clarity. In the visualization, mentally rehearse how you would apply the Stoic principles, how you would maintain objectivity, how you would focus on what's under your control, how you would preserve your emotional independence, how you would constructively reinterpret the experience, and how you would channel the energy into your development. This practice not only reduces the emotional impact of rejection when it occurs, because you've already anticipated it, but also solidifies your virtuous response patterns. It's like creating a neurological program that activates automatically when you face actual rejection. Another valuable exercise is reflective journaling, a practice Marcus Aurelius exemplified magnificently in his Meditations. At the end of each day, set aside 10 minutes to write down the rejections or challenges you faced and how you responded to them. Honestly assess whether you managed to apply the Stoic principles. Where did you succeed? Where did you fall short? What can you do differently next time? This simple exercise creates a feedback loop that dramatically accelerates your growth. Instead of repeating the same reactive patterns in the face of rejection, you consciously develop more virtuous and productive responses. A third powerful practice is the contemplation of role models, historical or contemporary figures who exemplify the transformation of rejection into positive obsession. The Stoics often studied the lives of people who demonstrated the virtues they wished to cultivate. By reflecting on how great achievers responded to rejection, you provide your brain with concrete examples to emulate. Nelson Mandela, transformed. 27 years of imprisonment, the ultimate rejection of his freedom and dignity, into an unshakable determination to create a post-apartheid South Africa based on reconciliation, not revenge. Abraham Lincoln faced multiple electoral defeats and political setbacks before becoming one of the most consequential presidents in American history. Study the stories of these people deeply, not just as inspiration, but as practical models for your own response to rejection. Now let's consider how to apply this method in different domains of life. At work, rejection can take many forms: not getting a promotion, having ideas ignored, receiving critical feedback, or even being fired. Stoic wisdom offers a path to transform each of these experiences. When you don't get a promotion, practice objective apprehension. I did not receive this specific promotion at this specific time. Avoid catastrophic conclusions like, I'll never be recognized, or my career has stalled. Next, apply the dichotomy of control. Focus on what you can influence: your skills, your performance, your next contribution. Cultivate emotional independence by remembering that your worth isn't defined by a job title or hierarchical level. Reinterpret constructively. Perhaps you need to develop specific skills before you're truly ready, or maybe there's a better opportunity in another department or company. Finally, convert this experience into a positive obsession with professional development. Use it as motivation to hone critical skills, expand your knowledge, and increase your organizational impact. In personal relationships, rejection can be particularly painful. whether in friendships, family relationships, or romantic ones. When a relationship ends or when your romantic advance is rejected, apply the method consciously. First, objectively observe what happened without catastrophizing. This specific person decided not to continue a relationship with me instead of, no one will ever love me. Apply the dichotomy of control. You cannot control the other person's feelings or decisions, but you can control how you respond, how you process the experience, and how you move forward. Practice emotional independence by remembering that while meaningful connections are important, your completeness and worth don't depend on the approval or acceptance of one specific person. Reinterpret constructively. Perhaps this breakup is creating space for a more aligned relationship, or revealing patterns you need to recognize in your relationship choices. Transform the experience into a positive obsession with personal growth. Dedicate yourself to developing a deeper understanding of yourself, improving your communication skills, or cultivating qualities you value in yourself, regardless of being in a relationship. In creative endeavors, rejection is practically guaranteed. Writers have manuscripts rejected, musicians have demos ignored, artists have their work criticized. The Stoic approach allows you to persist where others give up. Observe objectively. This specific editor did not accept this specific work at this time. Instead of, I'm a terrible writer, apply the dichotomy of control. You don't control the subjective preferences of others or market trends, but you control the quality of your work and your persistence. Cultivate emotional independence by evaluating your work by your own standards of excellence, not just by external validation. Reinterpret constructively. Perhaps this rejection is directing you toward the publisher or audience that will truly appreciate your unique voice. Transform the experience into a positive obsession with refining your craft. Use each rejection as incentive to refine your technique, deepen your expression, and persevere until you find the resonance your work deserves. Regardless of the domain, the Stoic method offers a path to not only survive rejection, but to use its energy to catalyze extraordinary growth. As Seneca wrote, difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. It's important to note that the Stoic approach does not promote emotional suppression or denial of pain. The Stoics deeply understood human nature and recognized that painful feelings would naturally arise. The goal is not to eliminate these emotions, but rather to develop the capacity to experience them without being overwhelmed by them. When you face rejection, allow yourself to feel the initial pain. Acknowledge it. Even observe it with curiosity, like a scientist would observe a natural phenomenon. Interesting how this rejection is creating a tightness in my chest and a tendency to ruminate on the past. This conscious acknowledgement already begins to transform your relationship with the emotion. After acknowledging the emotion, you can apply the Stoic principles to navigate beyond the immediate reaction toward a more constructive response. This isn't repressing the feeling, but rather processing it and transcending it. A common mistake is trying to apply the Stoic method without adequate preparation, only when the crisis of rejection is already upon you. To maximize its effectiveness, incorporate these practices into your daily routine, even in moments of relative calm. It's like an athlete who trains consistently to be prepared for competition. You develop philosophical muscles that will be available when you face significant challenges. The promise of this method is not a life without rejection or pain. No serious philosophy would make such a promise. Rejection is an inevitable part of the human experience, especially for those who dare to pursue significant achievements. The promise, instead, is a life where rejection doesn't have the last word, where you develop the capacity to transform even your most painful experiences into catalysts for extraordinary growth. As you incorporate this approach into your life, you may gradually notice a fundamental shift in your relationship with rejection. Instead of fearing it, you begin to recognize it as a necessary component of a life well lived. You start to see that those who never face rejection probably aren't challenging themselves enough, aren't taking significant risks, aren't growing to their full potential. Paradoxically, the more you develop the capacity to transform rejection into positive obsession, the less power rejection holds over you. You see it not as a terrible obstacle, but as a springboard, not as a sentence, but as a redirection. And with this inner freedom comes a powerful capacity to act with courage, creativity, and determination, regardless of external obstacles. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The rejection that initially seems to block your progress can, through the application of this method, become the very path by which you advance toward your deepest growth and most significant achievements. Start today to transform rejection into positive obsession. The next time you face an experience of rejection, big or small, see it as an opportunity to practice this philosophical alchemy. Observe it objectively. Focus on what you control. Cultivate your emotional independence. Reinterpret it constructively, and then, most importantly, channel its energy into a positive obsession with your own growth and development. The pain of rejection is real, but transient. The growth you can extract from it is lasting and transformative. The Stoics understood this truth 2 millennia ago. Today you have the opportunity to apply this ancient wisdom to transform your own challenges into stepping stones toward your best self. This is the alchemy of Stoicism applied to rejection, transforming the lead of painful experience into the gold of extraordinary growth. It's a process that requires conscious practice, but one that offers profound rewards for those who persist. And by mastering it, you will discover a paradoxical and liberating truth. The rejections that initially seemed your greatest obstacles can become the foundations of your greatest triumphs.